One of the many things you often hear in America these days, maybe not necessarily from the religious right alone, but from the far right in general, is the comparison between randomly selected people with Hitler, the Nazis, Stalin, and communism. One of the more vocal advocates of this idea is, of course, the entire Fox News propaganda mill department. As someone taking an objective look on what's going on the other side of the pond, all I can say to this is, well, for people trying to compare others to Nazis, you're sure doing a heck of a job acting like them. How can I say these slanderous things? Well, my thoughts on this were primarily raised while listening to atheist podcasts and the comparisons between the arguments creationists and evangelicals in general are coming up with, and what it actually says in the Bible. Conclusion: evangelicals have never really read the Bible. So how does this justify the comparison I'm trying to set up here? Well, not reading the literature your particular religion or political message is based on seems to be a frequent behavior amongst right-wingers of all religions and political fractions. I mean, let's just take for instance Lenin, the godfather of communist Russia. We now know today that Lenin had never really read any of Marx's writings, be it either the Capital or the Communist Manifesto. And neither did Stalin or Mao. So it's no surprise then that Marx's ideas about the rights of the working class and the classless society had by then been so mangled and detached from anything he actually said. Now let's take a look at the second most popular Catholic and the Germanic culture. Or, to be more accurate, what he believed to be Germanic culture. Much of Hitler's ideas on Germanic culture were inspired by the opera The Ring of the Nibelungen by Richard Wagner, which in turn was inspired by the actual Germanic epic, written and compiled in the time of the so-called migration period, some 1600 years ago. However, as said, it was merely inspired by the epic and had little to do with the actual content and ideas behind the original version. In other words, Wagner's opera is to the actual epic and what it actually says, as Peterson's Troy movie is to the Iliad and what it actually says. Yet, given what we really know about Germanic culture and what archaeology has revealed to us, one can only conclude that Hitler, as well as our last Kaiser, who also based his policies off of this epic, had never read the Nibelungen Saga, as well as the Edda tales, which also include portions as well as earlier and contradictory versions of some of the tales recalled in the Nibelungen epic. The irony there is that the Second, as well as the Third Reich, ended much like the Nibelungen epic does. That is, in mayhem, bloodshed, as well as in mass suicide and homicide. Put simply, in the end, everybody dies. Now let's take a look at the religious right. I mean, let's just take Lou pro-life Angle, who runs anti-abortion campaigns in America and other countries as well. Little does he apparently know that abortion is actually condoned in the Bible, not only with God's approval, but also with his direct involvement. Another interesting example are those family-oriented Christian groups all across the United States. Yet, ironically, Jesus himself explicitly told his followers that belief in him required separation from friends and family, and that you were not worthy of following him if you are not willing to forsake your own family. And as an objective observer from the other side of the pond, I really have to ask, what is it with Christian groups being so opposed not only to sex education, but to sexuality in general? I mean, if everyone promoting these groups claims to get their ideas from the Bible, then they all must have fallen asleep before getting to the so-called Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon. The Song of Solomon is I was going to say erotic love poem, but then again I guess that's what it is. 'Cause according to everything and anything you can find on this, the Song of Solomon is clearly described as a poetic piece which, depending on the interpretation, either alludes to or explicitly speaks of a sex scene between two lovers. And, creatards, if you don't believe me, a link hitherto is in the description. So in summary, yeah, the religious right, as well as the right-wingers, do present similar behavioral characteristics previously observed in both communism as well as in Nazi Germany. Neither the early communists, nor the Nazis, nor the religious or political right in the US have ever really read the pieces of literature they based their ideas on. All of them collectively cherry-picked what they thought somehow supported their worldview. As the Romans would say, ad unum omnes, all without exception.